broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by theunshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to WilmsFront for another featured interview show on this Thursday, the 16th of June, 2022. Tonight, we are live on the WilmsFront YouTube, DLive, and Odyssey channels, as well as back on the interactive entropy software, where you can ask myself or my guest tonight a question, or even better yet, send through a super chat. It is 8:30 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria, where rolling blackouts were avoided here across the East Coast as the Australian energy market operator has effectively nationalised the energy spot market. So there's lots of jargon here. I don't even understand it. So they've done this as a temporary solution to our energy crisis, though we'll all pay in the long term. That you can guarantee that. Our new Energy and Climate Change Minister, Chris Bowen, he's encouraging us to limit our energy consumption during the evening peak. Well, that's not going to stop me bringing in tonight's guest. Nick Holt of the Independent News Network on Substack. He is up in Queensland. Nick, how have you been?
G'day, Tim. Well, thanks, mate. It's good to be back on here. It's good to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing well. Apart from it's good down here that the most we have to complain about at this time of year is the weather, the big freeze. I'm not sure what it's like up north. The Sunshine State, is the sun shining?
Mate, the weather's doing pretty much what it's done every year for the last 38 years I've been on this planet. Although it has been a little bit different this year, to be honest. Some of these rain bombs, as they like to call them, we had some very bizarre weather on, I guess, southeast Queensland, northern New South Wales for a period there. A lot of the some of the more committed conspiracy theorists were having a field day with that one.
Yes, I know that the politicians are promising to build back better Lismore, and I know that set off the conspiracy theorists. Now, we've had our Australian federal election. The House and Senate seats are slowly being declared by the Australian Electoral Commission. They've still got to declare the Senate results for Western Australia, New South Wales, us here in Victoria, and up in Queensland. Pauline Hanson is projected to just scrape over the line up where you are. We might get a United Australia Party senator down here, but we're stuck with Anthony Albanese as Prime Minister for the next 3 years. That's clear.
Yeah, to be honest, I think I think it's irrelevant who's governing right now, whether it's Labor, Liberal, or anyone else. If you look at what's happening in the United States right now, it's a sort of a clear indication of what's coming our way, and it's fairly serious stuff. The Federal Reserve, that had already raised their interest rates, have raised them again as part of this kind of, I guess, aggressive interest rate program. So, inflation is running at about 8% there. Now, the RBA in Australia predicted, I think this morning, that inflation rates will be around 7% by the end of this year. So 1% off what America is. And I don't think that either of these governments would have been able to prevent what's coming. So I've kind of checked out at that level of politics. I see Anthony Albanese and Scott Morrison as, two heads of the one snake that was part of an even bigger snake that basically turned Australia into a very decadent, lazy, and sort of self-entitled nation, which has led us to where we are now. It's usually what leads people to the brink of a deep recession. Western people got lazy, they're woke, and arguably these woke people are some of the most entitled human beings on the planet. And you see these things at various stages of, various examples of end stages of empires. So,
I mean, yeah.
yeah.
Look up at where you are. What is that? Greensland, that's called now, with the 3 Greens elected in Brisbane, and of course the Teals in Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they were smart though, right? They were well organised. They knew that they didn't know consciously that Australia has become so woke and self-entitled that the biggest topics for people, the biggest policy topics for people on the voting ticket are these sort of ambiguous utopia fantasy enactments, like climate change and ending poverty overnight. So when people have heaps of cash, plenty of petrol in the car, they live in a city, they don't care. So they vote. And it didn't surprise me at all. But the good news is I think that it's inevitably coming to an end. I think it'll hit during Biden and, in our case, Albanese, because the problem with left-wing governments, right, is that as they're raising as the RBA in our case, or the Fed in the US raises the cash rate, right, inflation goes up, left-wing governments go and start spending more money. So they put us in an even worse position because no one gets the attitude in their head that this is really serious. I need to start pulling my finger out of my ass and working out how I'm going to provide for my family.
Well, Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg, I mean, they certainly spent a lot to save Australia from the pandemic. And you're right that not much has really changed with the change of government at the federal level. I mean, this energy crisis was probably always going to happen. But in terms of what's our RBA governor, Philip Lowe, I would never take anything that he says to the bank, to use the pun. I mean, what is it? He said that rates wouldn't increase until 2024. So I wouldn't listen to anything he's saying now because he's probably going to be wrong.
It's possible, but also, like, Australia is just a subsidiary of the United States. Whatever happens to the US eventually happens to us economically. That's just the nature of it. So America is at 8% now. He's saying 7%. It's not completely unreasonable to suggest that rate. But the problem is going to be, right, when people start saying, banks start saying, well, we need to now increase your monthly mortgage payments. Everyone's been spending like crazy in the last decade, paying for $1 million homes that shouldn't be worth a fraction of that. And when they start calling back the mortgage money, then you start getting some real panic starts setting in, and that's most likely where we're headed, medium to medium term. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, the reason I say a left-wing government is that, yes, you're right. You're dead right. The Liberal government spent a massive amount of money over the last sort of 8 years or whatever, or 11 years. They had 6 leaders in 11 years or something, and their spending just went up and up and up. But in the case of left-wing governments, they have they have zero fiscal conservatism. So even as that ship's going down, they're too proud and woke that they actually are going to start spending $1 billion on new bicycle path lanes and things like this. That's why it's dangerous to have a guy like Albanese in government right now, I think.
Well, here we've just got a shortage at the supermarket now of iceberg lettuces. One of my commenters here, Dawn Browning, she has a lettuce patch, so she's offered to send you one up, though I've had warned her that maybe Dan Andrews, under the new agricultural laws, could seize her lettuce patch. But over in the US, they started off with a baby formula shortage, and now they've got a tampon shortage. So people who menstruate can't get their adequate monthly supplies.
Yeah, that sounds horrifying.
What's causing it? Because it just seems like we know here that because of the recent floods and storms, that's why there's not many iceberg lettuces. But why? Like, we had for years the Chinese shoppers buying our baby formula to send it back to China. What's caused these shortages in the US?
I think it's a number of reasons. What's happening in Ukraine has a lot to do with it. Ukraine produces massive percentages of the world's wheat, for example. And none of that's now being exported for various sanctions. And also, Russia controls that part of the Ukraine borders on the Black Sea.
Yeah.
So, when these things start happening, in Australia's we represent like 2% of the world's economy, so we're pretty insignificant. But when big producers start having these kind of hits, then all of a sudden that country needs to get that supply from another country, and this has a knock-on effect around the world. So it's simply a supply and demand issue. There aren't enough lettuces.
Oh, well, I know why there is, but it just seems peculiar that the US, there's a shortage of those products, but not here. Or could they come here, these shortages? Because it's absolutely right. What happens starts in the US, tends to flow on to the rest of the world. And the UK, their energy crisis and their inflation, cost of living, I mean, that kicked off since the beginning of the year.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure, but it's possible that maybe we get our, we produce a lot of lettuce. Maybe we get our lettuce from New Zealand or whatnot. So we don't have the same constrictions placed on us with supply and demand. But that can happen with other products, and eventually it can happen to lettuce. New Zealand goes, well, no, we're going to deal with that country now. Everyone's trying to gobble up the goods and the produce in the world. I don't think I don't know why. I'm not an economist. That's for sure. But I think it's all of what's happening is fairly symptomatic of a empire, in our case, the West, that simply just got too rich, started getting too decadent, too wealthy, and eventually these things are bound to happen, right?
Yes, that's the cycle of civilizations, if you're a student of history. Now,
Absolutely, yeah.
Our federal election cycle is over for at least another 2.5 years, but in the United States, their election season is just getting underway. The 2022 midterm elections, they'll take place on Tuesday, November 8th. So that'll see all 435 seats in the House of Representatives up for election, and 35 of the 100 seats in the Senate. And there'll also be 36 gubernatorial elections, or elections for state governors. And as we've been alluding to, the economy is not going well in the US. So inflation, latest figure was 8.1%. So gasoline prices, they've topped $5 a gallon, which is about 3.7 litres in Australia. And so Congressional Democrats, assisted by the Never Trumpers, they last week launched what I call the January 6th Resurrection Show, which premiered last Thursday in US network Primetime. And it was produced by former ABC News president James Goldston. And it was hard to avoid even on Australian media. All of our cable news channels were covering it. They even kept it going. They didn't even cover Albo and Jacinda Ardern's press conference. And it was the committee members basically setting the scene. Well, the official it's supposed to be like a congressional subcommittee on January 6th, but it's more like a, what is it, Hollywood or Netflix documentary production.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But it's working. With the global media, it's working. Their goal here is to further demonize Trump and basically ensure that he's ineligible to run in 2024. This is all they've got, so they're milking it. There's no path to 2022. There's no path for the Democrats. They will get in a fair election. They will get annihilated. So it's going to be really interesting. I mean, given 2020, I just don't know what's ahead. In a perfectly just world, I'd say that the Democrats would basically blitz it. They'd take back the Senate. They'd take back the House. And that would steamroll on to Trump 2024, and you'd have to think he'd win that.
If he wants to run, which he's given all indications that he wants to.
Yeah, it's, from people inside that circle, it's fairly likely that he's going to announce it. I imagine he'll announce it after 2022. And this is another reason they're holding the select committee, January 6th select committee now. It's because they also want to cast doubt on the Republicans. This is one of their dirty tricks, right? They do it all the time. Start casting doubt on the Republicans as insurrectionists and MAGAs and all this sort of thing. So the timing is not a mistake. It's going to be, it's interesting.
They originally wanted the Democrats, what is that, a January 6th commission like they had after the 9/11 attacks. Because who was that? Yeah, Chuck Schumer, the Senate majority leader. What is it? He compared January 6th to Pearl Harbor and 9/11, even though there was only one person.
In the Civil War.
Yeah, one person who was
700,000 deaths.
And which was a Trump supporter. Another mistruth they kept repeating on the opening episode was that 5 police officers were killed during the, I don't call it an insurrection, I just call it an occupation, because that's what it was.
Yeah, well, insurrection is a legalistic term, and it's under that term, it's not what it was. You're right. Yeah, so that initially their whole narrative was that a policeman named Brian Sicknick was bludgeoned to death with a fire extinguisher by a Trump supporter. Then it was found out, and the media reported that, just completely across the board, every sort of bulletin introduction was the same. They're reading out the same thing. And then it was discovered that he didn't die from that at all. He died like half an hour to an hour later or something, somewhere else from a stroke. And they didn't change there. They didn't issue like a correction. They just stormed on with it, and they're doing it again. So they're well aware that they're lying. They know that some of us know they're lying, and they don't care.
No, because they've got it's a co-production with the mainstream media. It was carried on all 3 major networks, free to air, so ABC America, NBC, CBS, and CNN, and NBC's cable channel, MSNBC, or what's the nickname for it, MSDNC. It was only Fox that didn't cover it. We got some real talk from Tucker Carlson, who on everything has been the voice of common sense and truth throughout these past 18 months. And yeah, they can get away with these lies most of the time, because there's only basically Tucker and a few others at Fox who are countering these mistruths.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to win that war, that information war. It's basically impossible because it's so unfairly matched in terms of gross media outlet, maybe, if you will, gross media reach, saturation, these things. The average person can and they can be good people too, can quite easily just, without knowing why, have the thought in their head that Trump is incited a violent insurrection to overthrow the Capitol, because that's what they've heard either consciously or subconsciously through the news headlines. Yeah, we all do it to a certain degree. But this is how they operate, and they know that it works. Look how well it worked through COVID.
Yes, and that's part of the reason why there's the backlash against the Democrats now, because they have continued with this pandemic theater. What is it? Biden walking his dog outside with a mask on, and one of the reasons why Glenn Youngkin swept into power at the Virginia gubernatorial election last year was because Democrats and progressives pushing masks in schools, even on toddlers, 2-year-olds.
Yeah, it's a pretty sick agenda, and it looks like they're trying to keep the momentum of it going for whatever the next pandemic is going to be. It's really weird how much is being sort of dropped on mainstream media. Like monkeypox here, something else there.
Yeah. Oh, we're supposed to call it something else next week.
I saw that. Didn't that article to you? I read that and I thought, hang on a second. By its very nature, those individual scientists changing it make them racist because they associated Africans with monkeys. We didn't do it.
Well, it's apparently because a lot of the mainstream media photos of monkeypox, it's of black hands with monkeypox.
Oh no, is that what it is?
Yes, and
as I said, mate, the empire's coming down.
But have you looked into the how monkeypox was first discovered, like in monkeys?
No.
It was in Denmark in the late 50s. They were experimenting on monkeys to try and find a polio vaccine. So they basically discovered it in a lab.
Right.
And
it was released, or?
Well, it managed to find its way to the Congo in the 1970s. That was the first human case. So possibly it could have escaped.
Yeah. What? So why are we only hearing about? Go ahead.
What is it? It's more, acceptable to say it on platforms such as this. COVID may have leaked from the Wuhan lab.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It just got squashed, that. So what these are, because what we saw early on, obviously, it was kind of screwed America. I don't think they anticipated on Russia being able to kind of disseminate this information, but the biolabs that the US had funded and installed in Ukraine. So they've clearly got a whole bunch of, that's not a conspiracy theory, that's a fact.
Yeah.
Recently actually admitted by the US government.
Yeah, Victoria Nuland at that Senate committee with Marco Rubio.
Yeah, so people talk about Russia as the evil guys, and maybe Putin is evil, but America is developing bioweapons on the border of Russia.
And could that be where maybe there were some monkeypox cases?
Was there really?
Oh, I don't know. Well, where did this sudden outbreak come from? I'm not.
I guess all they need to do. Need to do is get a CIA agent, whoever takes the job, to take some monkeypox in a vial and just, clandestinely drop it in a bar somewhere in the other parts of the world, and away goes monkeypox.
Yeah. I don't know how it got into the West, but it's here.
Keep an eye out for it. I'm yet to see COVID.
What is it? January 2021. That was when the occupation happened. That was when the jabs were beginning to start rolling out, and it was supposedly because Trump was peddling misinformation and conspiracy theories about COVID. They said that's the reason that he lost. And I'm sure you remember election night. It's November 2020. It looked like that, Trump was easily going to win. And then all the votes stopped. And then it was evening Australian time when all of the mail-in votes came. Because, it was fair to assume that all of the people who were too scared to vote in person would vote for Biden.
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, I can't be completely accurate with the truth of what that outcome was, but the things that are truthful are. It was a lie for the mainstream media to run with the headline. Basically, it was ubiquitous everywhere around the world. Baseless voter fraud claims. There are no voter fraud. I mean, that's just nonsense. There's voter fraud in every election, and in this case, there was tons of evidence on the day. Evidence doesn't mean that it's necessarily conclusive to prove your assertion, but it's evidence.
Trump actually won.
Yeah, to prove that Trump won, but it's evidence. It gets popped in the bag, and they would just turn with Hunter Biden's laptop. Just don't look at this. Don't look over this way. And they went so aggressive on that it got the better of Trump, and he had to retreat and accept it. He knew he couldn't win that.
There's an historical consensus now that the 1960 US presidential election was stolen. There were voting irregularities in Chicago, Illinois, and in Texas. And if Nixon had won those two states, that would have flipped the presidency to him. And Nixon decided not to contest the results because he thought it would rip the country apart. And it was in the middle of the Cold War, and there was obviously paranoia. We can't appear to show the world that American democracy is corrupted. But to say that widespread voter fraud and that voter fraud can flip an election can never happen, that's just not true.
It's not true at all. It happens in corrupt countries all around the world every year.
So we had the transition period where all the courts knocked back Trump's and other people's appeals against appeals to saying that there needs to be proper auditing. And so we got to the reason why January 6th was a key date is that's when the Senate was counting the electoral college votes. And of course, Trump said at the time that we're going to march down peacefully to the Capitol. And it's clear what he said. And they also tried to use at the time, Giuliani used some hyperbole, let's have trial by combat, which is political hyperbole is used all the time. And so with this reboot, as I call it, they're attempting to dig up all of this political hyperbole as proof that it was an incitement to this insurrection.
Yeah. What's your question there?
that this is part of what they're trying to, because they couldn't get they couldn't impeach him again, and they're trying to basically say that it was Trump's not conceding that he'd lost that had led to the events, because they couldn't get him on inciting it, but because he believed the big lie, that's what led to January 6th.
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate. And we saw through the work of Darren Beatty and Revolver that there were FBI agents at this event, right? At least one FBI agent we know named Ray Epps, who was this kind of big boomer guy in the crowd going, everyone to the Capitol, everyone to the Capitol. But some young Trump supporters kind of sussed him out, and they all started gathering around him chanting Fed, Fed, Fed. So he's gone away, and it turns out that a bit later he was put on the FBI's wanted list, and then it was discovered from this reporting of Revolver News that Ray Epps was an FBI agent. He was taken off the FBI agent's most wanted list, and he disappeared. So, that day to me was always something bad was always going to happen. Trump's innocent of what they're suggesting he did, but I don't think it was a smart idea to do it, because it just gives the left ways to, as you said, now they can focus on imagery, right, of what happened that day, flames and MAGA people looking angry, all this sort of. That's what the left thrives on.
But this is all the reason it is called a production is because it takes different parts of the day and tries to mash it together. That's what was happening on the steps of the Capitol. And Liz Cheney, for the first time, she alleged that Trump claimed that the people chanting "Hang like Pence." I don't know if they did. Trump was reported to say, they make a good point.
Yeah, so it's a propagandized recreation of reality through their ideological lens. It's not reality. It looks like reality. There are people there. They did do those. It is them on TV, but the narrative is so far from the truth. And that's what they rely on, same as George Floyd. Big narratives, big, simple narratives that have an emotional impact on the viewer and will motivate them to think a particular way. In this case, progressive left-leaning. In all of these cases, look at gun shootings. There's a shooting at a school, so it happens all the time. Every time the media get down there, they cover it 24/7, right, around the clock. Little kids on camera getting shot, horrific stuff. And then within a heartbeat, the Democrats are out there calling for gun control. So people are very emotionally shaken by that footage that they believe to be exactly what the media is telling them in terms of the events. Not even what they're telling them, just the imagery they're seeing. And for them then to hear someone like me who thinks that there should be no gun control, they think I'm a monster, and they'll associate me. They'll detach themselves from seeing me as a human being and associate me with that school shooting. And that's how they play here, right? With all these media events like January 6th.
And the people who, many of them, they just their only crime was walking on into the Capitol. There are some who are still incarcerated to this day, yet to have charges or a trial. It's like they're Guantanamo Bay detainees. Their habeas corpus, all of their civil rights, liberties have just been completely stripped.
Yeah, that's really quite alarming, if not really the worst part about it all. You've got American citizens in solitary confinement in sort of some of the worst conditions in the country, and they've been there since January 6, 2021, right? So they've been there for a long time. They're not allowed visitors for that sort of thing. So the Democrats...
part of that is due to COVID.
Yeah, I think some of them...
They must
Yeah, exactly. They'll come up with some thing for it, but it's to send a message.
And well, Pete makes a good point that BLM 2.0 burnt down cities, and Antifa destroys Portland on a regular basis, and now you have the intimidation of the Supreme Court justices with the leaked Supreme Court decision or draft decision, which would overturn Roe versus Wade. And now you have a pro abortion terror group called Jane's Revenge, which is claiming credit for a string of recent attacks on pregnancy centers and declared open season on pro-life organizations.
Who is it?
Well, that's what they call Jane's Revenge. They have apparently already launched nearly 24 terror attacks on pro-life pregnancy centers. I'd never heard of this organization until they claimed credit. I mean, it's not surprising that a pro-death organization is using violence, political violence.
Yeah, I haven't actually heard of that. Surprisingly, I haven't heard of that group. But, look, it's bound to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, and you had Chuck Schumer saying that the justices, if they overturn this decision, they'll pay. And there was a left-winger who was arrested outside of Justice Brett Kavanaugh's home, saying that, well, he planned to assassinate the justice, shoot him dead.
I saw that. Yeah, look, I think it's just reflective of the state of these radical leftists in America. They're insane. Quite a few of them. They're very mentally ill people, and they're not getting the help that because they're getting reaffirmed by people like Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. That what they're doing.
But they get away with
simply. And they get away with it. Yeah, there's no repercussions.
I mean, where's the issue on them?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that cops aren't arresting some of these people is just extraordinary. What took place in those? What the fellow commentator just then was saying. The level of and price tag of the rioting that was done in Portland by Antifa and parts of California is astronomical, and they're tearing down relics of the Republic. How's that not an insurrection? It's clear that they know that they're hypocrites. They know that these people are just helping them. They know that they don't have any respect for them. When I say they, Biden, Pelosi, Clinton's, Obama. That's why leftists are always used.
And I remember Jen Psaki, she didn't condemn the protests that were taking place outside Supreme Court justices' homes. Though the White House, they have condemned the pro-abortion terrorism by Jane's Revenge. So it's good to see that they do have some sort of line when it comes to political violence on the left. Jen Psaki is now gone, and well, this is another reason why there's so much eye rolling to put it mildly about Biden's constant appointments based on race, gender, sexuality. So his new press secretary, Karine Jean Perry, who is a Black lesbian immigrant, and of course the recent Supreme Court justice confirmation of Ketanji Brown, and then of course his VP pick based on gender and color, cuckling Kamala Harris, who is even worse than he is in terms of capability.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think they're aware that they're incapable, and I think they're being incapable in some regards on purpose, because it's incapable for the people of the United States, but capable maybe for other people that might benefit. China, for example, Biden's doing everything you could do to tank the economy and destroy, prosperity for Americans. It's not him being incapable, or he knows that he could easily fix that. And that's probably the interesting part about them still picking these gender or whatever woke selections for different positions of power, because it's just, where do they go from here? Past sort of transgenderism in kids, like, what's next? I feel like they're running out of things,
Well, that seems to be the wedge that Biden and the Democrats, that's their other strategy into the midterms. What is it? Biden in the last 24 hours has signed an executive order supposed to counter the anti-trans and LGBT legislation that's been passed in the states. And obviously he's tried to rally Democrats around protecting Roe versus Wade and call for common sense gun control. We know that most of the Democrats would like to just gut the Second Amendment, but this is the thing. They always use the term common sense gun control. It's like the people now saying, oh, like, we don't support lockdowns anymore. We just support common sense precautions like masks.
Yeah, common sense to who?
Yeah, it's because they know that what they really want, they promote like these things as common sense, because if they told the public what they would really like to do, then nobody would buy what they're proposing.
Definitely, yeah. They hear it. I mean, that's a prime example of how these big ideas get taken up by the average person in the general public. Like, common sense. Well, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Who wouldn't want common sense gun laws, or who wouldn't think that Black Lives Matter? So you immediately can't get past them at that stage. But gun control for me is, as I'm an Australian, but I'm talking about it from a position that I would argue for, and that is that it's a complete non-negotiable. I mean, I've never heard one good argument yet for abolishing the Second Amendment and why it was put in there as the Second Amendment, and that's very simple, and that's for people and well-organized militias to be able to defend themselves against, when the US government goes rogue. And boy, did they go rogue. And people say, well, they didn't have muskets back then. It's like, that's a terrible argument. The government didn't have drones either, AR-15s is all they've got. So, when people mock and look down, it's classic champagne sipping socialism, like liberals looking down their nose at these gun people like they're animals,
I remember that was one of the flashpoints in Curry Lake, who's the MAGA aligned Republican candidate for governor of Arizona. You had the privilege of interviewing her. She had that infamous exchange with when she called out Liam Bartlett from Australian 60 Minutes, and she said that she feels sorry for what's happened to Australia, and she said this is why we'll never give up our Second Amendment. And I think her most brutal line was, are you a serious journalist over there, or are you considered a bit of a joke?
Yeah, well, they are a joke, but they're also in very powerful positions, because like academics and left-wing journalists, there's only 20% to 30% of these really woke people on in Western Civ, if that, 10%, 20% maybe. But most of that 20%, whatever, it works in the media and in academia. So they have power. They can and politicians just swing with the breeze, and they've all gone left now. So yeah, I mean, Liam Bartlett he's just a clown, really. I mean, I don't really have anything to add to him because he doesn't have any kind of serious proposition or nothing of any kind of intellectual weight that you'd go, oh, I'd like to engage in that and learn. There's heaps of Liam Bartletts out there, that's for sure. But it is an interesting reflection of how these people will look at someone like Kari Lake, make up their mind about them, and treat them that way. They see them in. I think to do that, you have to get to the stage where you see that person almost in an inhuman light. You know, they're the enemy. Let's get them. I'm gonna get that person.
But the problem for him, she is super smart and super savvy, and so she recorded it on her end and released it first, where he's even more disparaging of her and claims, "Oh, do you believe the moon landing was fake?" That didn't make the final 60 minutes cut, but it all started to kick off because Kari Lake wants to improve the integrity of elections. This is the absurd thing, wanting like voter ID laws and more scrutiny of how the votes are counted. That's apparently, you're believing conspiracy theories. But it took, I think, about a month for Liam Bartlett. I swear he's only got a job on 60 Minutes because he's got a deep voice. So introduction, he can say, I'm Liam Bartlett. And he mashed in that interview with just a bunch of other people saying how dangerous Trump is and that, he admires Putin and Xi, he'd like to be like them.
Yeah, so it's a hit piece, that's what they call it. It's a hit piece, and the objective of a hit piece when you're sitting around the round table for those guys is it doesn't start with let's interview Kari Lake and see what she has to say about the world. It's we're writing a hit piece on Trump. Let's go and find some people in Trump's circle that we can throw into that hit piece and try and burn and show how crazy. But Kari Lake's worked in media. She was a top journalist for 30 years. So, she made him look like a fool. He embarrassed himself on international television. And it was a joy to watch.
Yeah, it was interesting the end product, because I think 60 Minutes knew that they had to air it in some form. But they do this a lot of the time, these shows. Like they'll interview somebody for, say, like an hour, and then use about not even a minute of it and mash in like all these other people to attack them.
Yeah, it's manipulative editing. It's bad faith. It's unethical, and that's what they do.
Kari Lake is part of what is now called this ultra MAGA renaissance, because this is a really stupid term that Biden himself coined for Republicans who are opposed to another one of his massive spending bills. And of course, Trump, he decided to appropriate it, saying that we need to go to ultra MAGA because our country was ultra prosperous, ultra secure, ultra safe. And you obviously have DeSantis in Florida. He'll easily get reelected. And a lot of there's already been some primaries for the Senate where the MAGA aligned candidates have won. All these, like the presidential primaries, they all happen on different days. So it's hard to keep up which primaries when.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, we've discussed for most of this program what the Democrats are trying to throw at these MAGA candidates. But as far as the polls are still showing that the Republicans will sweep the House and the Senate.
Yeah, like we said before, it unless something happens, it seems fairly likely based on poll indications. At which point then I assume Trump will announce his candidacy officially after they win that. and then he'll start doing rallies every single week, and it's going to get pretty wild because I'll be doing everything to stop that movement again. I mean, it's just incredible, really, when you think about. Despite the fact the media portrays Trump as this kind of crazy guy walking around an old mansion by himself, going crazy, he's still out there crushing like 40,000 people rallies. He has not stopped.
And this is with not just a mainstream media blackout, but a social media blackout. I mean, good find trying to find his rallies live streamed online.
Absolutely. And once he knows how short-sighted and ratings focused the mainstream media are, once he announces his candidacy for president, they're gonna love it. The cameras will be on Trump all the time because he's just a ratings machine.
Do you think that, well, first of all, Elon Musk, his purchase of Twitter will go through and really restore Trump's account, and then will Trump come back and tweet?
I don't really know about the first half of that question because I don't particularly know too much about Elon, but I would doubt Trump would come back. It's just given the nature of his personality. It's hard to know. It'd be a tough one for him because on one hand, chance, he would get the biggest audience Twitter's ever had, and that biggest number of followers for sure, and that he loves that sort of thing, and he would love to tweet again. But on the other hand, they deleted him, so there'd probably have to be quite a serious wipeout of everyone that was involved in deleting him before he agreed to come back on. It'd be a negotiation between Musk and Trump, I imagine.
I mean, Musk
and I should add, Musk has just, I don't know if you told me this, but Musk has just endorsed DeSantis.
That's what I've seen in reports. He's got a Trump type business personality, that stable genius with the stuff that he's putting out on Twitter, like replying to AOC, stop catcalling me.
Yeah, he's a bit of a troll. He's a good-hearted troll.
Yeah. And which is like all throughout history, like geniuses, they've always been eccentric like this. I mean, we've seen in our own past election cycles, Clive Palmer and some of his various things he's said over the years.
True, but I certainly wouldn't attribute the word genius to Clive Palmer.
Now, I think the reason why it's a safe bet that the Republicans are going to do well is when you have places like San Francisco recalling school board members who are too obsessed with woke nonsense and still masking kids, and they just withdrew their soft on crime DA. When you have a city like San Francisco, which supposedly is the liberal Mecca, or it's become more like the degenerate Mecca, are starting to flip, that's when you know that particularly parents have had enough of the indoctrination in schools, and also by the media as well. They're seeing through all of that.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, people are starting to have enough. Have had enough of it all, especially parents. You're right. Look, that's the first step towards, I think, finding some inner bravery to stand up to these crazy people who call you names and all this nonsense. There's no need to bend to the knee ever of someone like that or acquiesce to them. They call you a name, then you either mock them or you treat them like a child. People need to start doing more of that. Otherwise, it just gets crazier and crazier, and it gives politicians the chance to do more harmful and more stupid things.
I mean, it's, what is it, Pride Month over in the United States. So I just call it Pride Month because I don't know how many letters you're supposed to say now. But like that, degeneracy in those parades is on display again. And then you have the virtue signaling by the corporations and the streaming platforms. Though even they are starting to see that go woke, go broke is turning true, especially for Netflix. And well, DeSantis certainly sure showed Disney, like, you don't like our protecting parental rights in education, fine, like, there's your tax breaks gone.
Yeah, more people like DeSantis is what's required at leadership levels for sure.
I mean, that was a perfect example of if a political leader just stands up to a corporation that's trying this sort of woke intimidation, because they've done this in the past with, North Carolina and their, trans bathroom bill, but they're not going to pull out of Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar.
No, or China, or parts of Eastern Europe. They're way smarter. They actually want their civilization to prosper and multiply rather than fail and go extinct.
Now, your podcast YouTube channel, there's nothing on it anymore because you got too many videos taken down, including I'm going to use like weasel words, but you know who I mean. One of your videos that got taken down, you interviewed a certain young LNP staffer who was hospitalized due to, well, shall we say, climate effects, and that got taken down. And
he's hospitalized because of the Pfizer vax.
I was trying to use weasel words.
I know.
But yes, I mentioned that he went to hospital on one of my shows, and it got taken down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's why I was using such weasel words. Like you interviewed him for a full nearly hour. I just mentioned him and showed a photo, and it got taken down.
Yeah, these people are sick and very cowardly people. It's a shame, but there are alternate platforms. I've moved now, so all my content now comes through Substack, which is Nick Holt .substack. Yep. There it is. Yeah. So that's certain things are behind the paywall, but the majority of it's free. There'll be videos and podcast episodes being published through that channel as well.
And I noticed you had George Papadopoulos on. You previously interviewed him. This is a fresh interview.
No, this is just sort of resourcing that interview because it was relevant to what's happening with the Michael Sussman and the Durham report. So it got escalated up.
Because the Russiagate hoax, it's fair to call it now, is now completely fallen apart, which was that dominated the first 3 years of Trump's presidency until there was Ukrainegate. And now the people who pushed the dossier, they could have charges against them now.
Yeah, Christopher Steele. But the interesting thing is, it's almost like it doesn't matter anymore because truth is not enough to sway someone's opinion on something. They believe in broad narratives, like Trump colluded with Russia. Well, actually, no, he didn't. Here's you're this, you're that. That must mean this, that. Rather than that, there's a complete unwillingness to engage with facts. So something like Russiagate, it'll probably stay at gate. It'll probably never get properly exposed. Who knows?
Oh well, they've still used their the specter of Russiagate in terms of those Republicans who opposed the US arming Ukraine and putting sanctions on Russia, such as Rand Paul. All you MAGA Republicans, you're all just apologists for Putin, a brutal dictator, because Trump is. We saw that, seen that over the past 5 months since the Russia-Ukraine conflict began.
Yeah, it's you just cut out there, mate. What was your point? You were saying something before Russia.
To push the war in Ukraine, for the US to keep funding it, they still bring up Russiagate.
Oh yeah, it's hilarious. That's how powerful that narrative was. It's like, it's one of the great narratives. If you think about it, spy versus spy, the old Russia. The Cold War foe. It's ingrained in people's minds from movies and TV shows. It's perfect.
Well, it's been great to catch up with you, Nick, and get your expertise and insights on what I call the Resurrection show, because, well, you're following US politics much more than Australian domestic politics. And yeah, so again, it's nickholt.substack.com. You're still active on your Twitter account, and all of your shows, they're filtered through the various podcasting platforms.
That's correct. Thanks a lot. It's great to be back on.
Yeah, and we'll keep in touch, and definitely when it comes closer to the November the 8th, we'll certainly touch base again.
Sounds good. All right, mate. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, everybody. That's the WilmsFront featured interview show for this week. There'll be no WilmsFront next Thursday evening, but I will be back the following Thursday. So I'll see you all for Trad Tasman Talk tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. Melbourne time, on the WilmsFront, on the Unshackled YouTube channel. And also keep an eye out for a new report from Tiger Mountain, which will be published tomorrow. And of course, the Unshackled newsletter, published every Saturday now in your email inbox. And also keep visiting the unshackled.net for all of our new articles that we're publishing. We're publishing articles regularly now. Dawn says, I don't get Nick's notifications on Twitter. Somebody please tag me. Yeah, I still don't understand how sort of notifications work on how you get an alert. But I just read tweets rather than do much tweeting myself. Thank you all for watching. It's always good to have an interactive chat. If you don't want to send through a super chat during the show, you can donate through the unshackled.net or sign up for a recurring membership subscription. So take care, everyone. Stay safe, stay sane, stay healthy, and I'll see you all tomorrow night.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes, and keep visiting the unshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.